All right, my name is Lee Manatic. I appreciate you guys letting me come up here and run my mouth for the day. I don't know, it's probably a nice break from what you guys do, to have somebody else come in besides listening to Donovan and Robert and Nicole and the group continue, to talk all the time. So I'm from Charleston. I was born and raised in Charleston. My sobriety date is November the 21st of 2010. I have a sponsor who knows that I exist, which is important. I've got sponsees. I'm a service work junkie. I do a ton of service work, probably more than I should, but I like it. I like doing recovery. That's probably one of the many things that I like to tell people is that drugs and alcohol are a lifestyle. When we're out there running and gunning and doing what we're doing, like we're blinders all in on drugs and alcohol are a lifestyle. Recovery is a lifestyle. The book tells us that, and all the people who we surround ourselves with when we get into recovery tell us that you got to jump in this thing with both feet. There's a line in We Gnostics that says we wholeheartedly met these requirements. I wholeheartedly met the requirements that the dope man had. Like whatever he told me to do that I needed to do to get what I wanted from him, that's what I did. I wholeheartedly met the requirements that the bartender had, And so when I came into recovery, I had to wholeheartedly meet the requirements that recovery had, and that included jumping in this thing with both feet. Home groups, sponsors, big book studies, reading the book, step work, calling people, helping others, building a connection, building a new network, like all of these things I had to do. Recovery is a lifestyle. And it went from I have to do these things to I want to do these things. And this is all I know now. 98% of my life is recovery. I don't work in recovery, but I work with a lot of people who are in recovery. And my job, I'm still helping people and solving problems. Like it's the wildest thing. I do that in my off time, and then I also do that when I'm actually working. I run a support team. We fix all the problems. It's what we do. I think one of the other messages that I like to send people is that the disease doesn't care. The disease doesn't care who we are or where we came from or how much money we have or who our daddy is, how we identify ourselves, what kind of label we put on ourselves. Our disease doesn't care about any of that stuff. I didn't grow up with a lot of trauma. My family was very middle class and Norman Rockwell. It was my parents were together till the day my dad died. I still have a great relationship with my mom and my brother. I rode bikes and went to school. Like there was no tragedy there wasn't any broken homes or anything like that. There wasn't any loss. I didn't lose a career or a family or kids or a house or anything like that. I didn't go bankrupt or anything like that. I never acquired any of that stuff. I was too busy getting high, So like this idea that we come in with a stereotypical story, that's not my story, but the disease doesn't care. The disease doesn't care about any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. The disease wants me miserable. The disease wants me to be terminally unique, alone, and miserable. And that's what it's going to do. It's going to isolate me, and then it's going to kill me. That's just what it does. One of the many, many things that my sponsor taught me early in recovery is that it is impossible to fix a messed up mind with a messed up mind. And I walked in here with a messed up mind. The book teaches us that there's 1,000 ways to get sober. The AA, the 12 steps, CA does not have a monopoly on recovery. And we advocate whatever recovery is going to work for anybody. We don't hold any grudges against somebody who doesn't use the 12 steps to get sober. Those of us who use the 12 steps to get sober tried a whole lot of other ways, and none of those ways worked for us. That's how we ended up here. There's a paragraph in There's a Solution that says none of us liked the self-searching, the soul-seeking, the leveling of our pride, the making of amends that was necessary for us to start a new way of life. Nobody wants to do those things. Nobody wants to crush their pride and ego and admit that they're wrong. But if I wanted to get and stay sober, that's what I had to do. And there are people who find other ways by which to get and stay sober. And I'm all about it. More power to you, rock and roll. It just didn't work for me. The first time I drank, I was 13. I'd spent the night at a friend's house. We snuck out. We were wandering around the neighborhood aimlessly. My brother had graduated from high school that previous summer, and a guy that he graduated with pulled up, riding down the street and was like, yo, man, we're partying at the house. Come on over. And so we went over there, and I'm 13 years old, and I walked into this high school, college rager, and I've arrived. Like, yes, it doesn't get any better than this. And I got blackout drunk. From the beginning, I exhibited the disease. From the beginning, I exhibited this allergy, this phenomenon of craving, this once I start, I can't stop, this I want more. The book talks about the different types of drinkers. The first one is the moderate temperate drinker, the one who can take it or leave it alone. My mom is a moderate temperate drinker. She'll pour a glass of wine. She might drink it, she might not. That bottle of wine will sit open in her fridge for a week and she won't even look at it. And I have no idea what that's about. That makes no sense at all. Drink the wine. That's why you open the wine, right? Matter of fact, I just said this last week when I was sharing this meeting. I was at my mom's house the other day, and she likes to drink wine, and she likes to give wine to her friends for gifts, and they're normal people. They can do it, and it's all good. She has 19 bottles of wine in her house right now. Huh. Like, that blows me away. Like, drink the wine, I just can't wrap my head around that, About 4 or 5 years ago, I used this Zyn, this nicotine, pouches stuff, because I finally quit smoking. I went into this little shop on King Street to grab a tin because I was out. When I opened the tin, the pouches were defective, and they had all burst open. And so I opened up was a can of dust. And the first thing that I thought was, can I snort this? Yeah, no, maybe, right? I'm like years sober. That's the first thing I thought of. It's different. It's just different, And so from the beginning, I exhibited the disease, Fast forward, a little bit of time or whatever, I made a new group of friends in high school. They all got high and partied. I started getting high and partying, and I immediately ran into some consequences, or at least consequences for a Norman Rockwell kid, right? I failed off the baseball team, and I almost failed the 10th grade, and I got into a lot of trouble, and my parents are right on top of me. I got into I got on restriction, all of those things. And I stopped drinking and using, and the book talks about, again, the different types of drinkers, right? That was probably the only time in my career as an addict and an alcoholic that I could have stopped on my own, but I hadn't had anywhere near the amount of consequences that we have to have before we start taking a look at our behaviors and the decisions we're making. I was just a 14-year-old dumb kid, right? And so fast forward like 6-7 years, and I'm in college. I was at the College of Charleston. I was a couple of years in, and I got bored. When I wasn't at college and I wasn't working a little part-time job, I was hanging out at the pool hall. Because that's a good place for a college kid to be hanging out, is a pool room with a bunch of sketchy people and criminals. And that's probably one of the things that I have to be honest about. I'm not I'm not comfortable around normal people. Like, I got like 5 minutes with normal people. It's like sports and the weather. It's like, why am I talking to you? Like, I can't relate to you. You can't relate to me, or at least that's how I think in my mind. If I spend enough time around normal people, I'm going to start trying to be normal. And normal people can do things like drink and not get in trouble and not burn their lives to the ground. I can't do that, And so I dropped out of school. And I was going to go and start my life, and I moved across country for a couple of weeks, and then I ended up, coming back here because that didn't work out. And, I ended up working at a place called Money Man Pawn Shop in Charleston. There's a large sort of chain of pawn shops in Charleston called Money Man. And I worked for several of them over the years. I don't remember much about those years. I mean, I can tell you that if you pawned anything in Charleston between 97 and 2000, I might have been the guy that robbed you. I'm sorry. It was my job. That's what I did. But I don't really have a whole lot of memories from those days. The disease progresses. The more that we have the wherewithal to do more, than the more that we do. And I get a few flashbacks of some stuff that I did during those years. Not real proud of any of that stuff. The first real, the next real memory that I can put together, it was 02 or 03. I think it was early 03. And I had gotten a new job. I was working at some pool and spa joint in North Charleston. And I had what I like to call my first red letter day in my disease, right? I had, first of all, I got paid every 2 weeks, so I got paid on Friday, which meant that I was broke Sunday morning, because that's kind of how it works when you get paid every 2 weeks, is you while out for about 96 hours, and then after that you you know, you try to piece the next 8-10 days together because you done gone broke again. So I got paid Friday. I was broke Sunday morning. I was living out on Folly Beach, and I suddenly, the book says this, right? There's this story. Suddenly, I had this thought. I'm gonna go run to North Charleston and go and see my man. Vaguely in the back of my mind, I've been drinking, and maybe you shouldn't be, drinking and driving. But, reassuredly, I do this all the time, right? This is old hat. I do this every day. There hasn't a day gone by in the last 5 or 6 years that I haven't driven dirty and, not sober, intoxicated in some way, shape, or form. I was high every day or drinking every day, mostly high, but drinking too every day, all day long. That's what I did, I jumped in the car. It was a beautiful, bright, Sunday afternoon, late morning, early afternoon. It was like lunchtime. And I lost control of my car on the interstate. And I hit the wall, and I bounced off the wall, and I hit the wall, and I bounced off the wall again, and the car backed itself into the emergency lane. And I kind of came to, and I looked to my left, and there was a dude who was standing on the interstate. Like he was looking in the window, you know what I'm saying? And I looked behind him, and there's like 12 cars just dead stop. And he saw me come to, and he opens the car door. He said, "Yo, man, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he grabbed me by my shirt collar and he pulled me out of the car. He said, "Your car's on fire, man. You got to get out of the car." Oh, okay. And it was February, so I was wearing a jacket and I was walking away from the car and I was feeling in my jacket and I had my cigarettes because I smoked at that time. But I didn't have my lighter. And I turned around and looked at my car, and my car was this molten, flaming, smoking wreck. And for 1 second, I thought about lighting my cigarette on the fire that was my car, because that makes sense, right? That makes sense. That's not normal, right? Don't tell that story to like normal people. They won't get that. I have no idea how I talked myself out of that DUI. I had no license. I had no license on me. I had no insurance. I had no insurance on me. There was a 6-pack on the front seat. I don't know how I pulled that off. The cop gave me a ride to a payphone to go call my mom. I have no idea how I pulled that off. Now, you would think the SR22, right? The losing the license, the court case, the repo, because I wasn't paying for the car, right? The repo, all of that. Like, you would think any normal person would be like, okay, there's a problem here. Like, something's got to give. We got to correlate what's going on here. I couldn't do that. See, the book talks about the hard drinker. Right? The book talks about the one who exhibits the tendencies of an addict or an alcoholic. He might die a few years before his time. Given sufficient reason, ill health, change of environment, warning from a doctor, like he can stop and go in a completely different direction all on his own. My dad was a hard drinker. And the story is that one day he came home from work. Mom took my brother to go shopping and left me home with the old man. He tied one on and passed out on the couch. I was like 2 years old. And I got out the front door, and he woke up 45 minutes later, and he couldn't find me. I was playing in the middle of the street. And the next 35 years, we who knew him and loved him can count on one hand how many drinks he took, because he said, "I'm not going to do that ever again." And I don't have any idea what that's about. Look, I'm going to give you the greatest hits, but I stole from my family, and I stole from my friends, and I stole from my jobs, and I totaled cars, and I got arrested. I did many of the things that we say that we're never going to do. We draw all these lines in the sand and say, "I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that." I got lines in the sand that walk me from here to Miami. And so I'm not a hard drinker. I'm not a moderate temperate drinker. I'm not a hard drinker. But at that time in 2003, when I have to move home with mom and dad because I got nowhere else to go and I got no car, and I got all these charges and all these problems going on, I couldn't correlate that. I couldn't put that together. I just thought that I was going to have to find some way to control, right? There's a page on page 31, there's a paragraph that talks about all the different ways that we try to control and enjoy our drinking and using. I can tell you right now, if I was controlling the amount that I was putting into my system, I wasn't enjoying it, and neither was anybody else around me. And if I was enjoying the amount that I was putting in my system, there was absolutely no control. There was just no control. I was the last person that you needed to give the dope sack to at a party, because y'all ain't getting that shit back. That's just how it is what it is, you know? Fast forward a couple of more months, I ended up with a new job. I started working for a place called S&K Menswear. They were like a mid-level clothing store in the 90s and the 2000s. They went bankrupt in '08. That wasn't exactly my fault. But one of the interesting things about that is that I wasn't sure if S&K was going to make me pass a drug test. And so I dried out long enough to get this job. And then as soon as I figured out that they weren't going to make me take a drug test, matter of fact, the third day that I was there, they had hired like 4 of us all at the same time, like a new training class, because there was a couple of stores in Charleston and they were figuring out where to put everybody. And somebody asked, I can't believe you guys haven't given us a drug test yet. And the manager was like, yeah, no, we don't do anything like that. Ding! I got high that night. I was on the way back from the job calling my buddy, yo, can I come through? It's been like 6 weeks since I seen you, man. What's up? Right? I got high that night because I didn't have any reason to not get high. I still couldn't put it together that the reason why I was starting this new job again and the reason why I was driving this car that I just bought from mom and dad or whatever was because I had destroyed my life for the 3rd or 4th time in the last 5 years. I couldn't put it together, you know? I worked for S&K for like 4 or 5 years. And I went from Charleston to Augusta and Augusta to Spartanburg. I'm very good at running retail stores and small businesses. I run a retail store blindfolded, you know. And the book tells us that we have lots of talents and abilities. There's actually a part in To Employers. It says that, you know, a sober alcoholic can do the work of 2.5 normal people. That's what it says. It actually says the actual quote is, I have 2 sober alcoholics working for me and they do the work of 5 of my other employees, is what it actually says. We are amazing people. You know, and I don't know any of you. You and I have chatted before because I've been up here before, but you're amazing people. You know, and really, truth be told, like somewhere deep down, you kind of know that, and somewhere deep down inside, that kind of terrifies you because you don't know what to do about it. And I know what that feels like. You know, I know what it feels like to create pressure in your own head based on talents and abilities that you know you have that you're wasting. I know what that feels like. And that's what I was doing. You know, I was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I was running this retail store, relatively, if not very successful, and my personal life was in an absolute shambles. And then, of course, no different than any other addict or alcoholic, it started to bleed back into work again. And that's what it's done at every job that I've ever had. It bled into the pawn shop, and it bled into the pool and spa joint. Now it's bleeding into the S&K Menswear, right? Like my disease is starting to show up at work. You know, I'm missing days and I'm running late, and there's money missing at the job again, right? You know, there's inventory that's out of whack. And we can all tell those stories. We all got those stories, you know? And I had my next real red letter day. So I went from Charleston to Augusta, and then I went from Augusta to Spartanburg. And then I came back to Charleston because I was given an opportunity to take over a store in Charleston. And I remember when I called my dad about that, I was in Spartanburg, and I said, hey man, look, they're giving me an opportunity to take over a store in Charleston. It was at the front of my neighborhood. It was at the front of the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I said, look, it's October. They want me to take over the store now. It's going to be mall holiday hours. It's going to be nuts. You know, I'm just going to move home with you and crash with you, get the store through the holidays. I got to flip the whole place over. I got to hire all new staff, all the things. And then come January when, everything calms down and I get this place whipped into shape, then I'll go find my place and move out. He said, sure, no problem. That's fine, man. Come on. It was October of 2006 when I made that phone call and I moved home. I moved out of my parents' house in December of 17. Yeah, right. The math doesn't math there, right? See, what happened was, mom and dad are paying all the bills. I'm living with them, right? I moved home with them, right? I'm making good money. I'm running this retail store in the 90s, early 2000s, whatever, when money was worth a lot more back then than it is right now. I had no bills, you know what I'm saying? And about a week goes by and I call this, dude that I used to know in Charlotte, like, yo, man, can you hook me up? And he's like, yeah, meet me at the bar at the front of the neighborhood. And there was a bar at the front of the neighborhood called North Park Grill. I walked in the door and it was like a reunion. All of the people from the old neighborhood, and I went to high school with her there. A dude that I went to elementary school with that I'd known for 30 years was there. And he's like, yeah, dude, I sell Coke. My man, let's go. It was on. Like it was on. And when I wasn't at work, I was at this bar. I mean, that had become my life. And about a year later, I had the next real red letter day. You know, I told the lie. It was a Wednesday night, and I was at the bar, and I told the lie that we all tell at some point. I'm gonna have money tomorrow, right? You know, and so of course he fronted me some dope. Next day rolls around, I'm at work, I don't have any money, I don't get paid till Friday, you know, and he calls me, where's my money? And it's about 8:30, and I'm closing the drawer up while I'm on the phone with him, and suddenly I had this thought, there's $1,000 in this drawer, right? You know, vaguely, lately, you don't need to be robbing out the till, but reassuredly, I run the store, right? They're never gonna know. I'll put the money back. I get paid, you know, right? It's one day. Let me go ahead and get my man's money. And now I got to go to the bar so I can give him his money. So let me get a little extra money because I got to go to the bar. I had a new bank, right? I had cash anytime I wanted it, right there for me. You know, I've done this before, right? About another year went by. And I remember I sat my parents down, and it was in the holidays. I'm pretty sure it was like 2 or 3 days after Christmas. And I sat my parents down to explain to them that I was a thief and a liar, and I was going to go to jail because there was 5 deposit bags hidden underneath my bed in my room, missing about $2,000 in cash that I had no way to put back. I was 32 years old when I had this conversation with them. Living in my parents' house, no bills, very few bills, you know, and I have no way to keep my hands on any money for any longer than it takes for me to get from the bank to the dope man to the bar. That was my life, you know. And my parents did what most parents would do. They saved me. You know, we went and got the money, we put it all back in, we put it all in, and I deposited everything, and I didn't get arrested. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and put our lives back together again. And so, you know, we went and paid all the payday cash advances and all the car title loans and all the different ways that imaginative ways we find, you know, put our hands on money, right? And we put this plan together, and I was going to sign my paycheck and give it to them, and then they were going to give me a couple of bucks so I can buy cigarettes and gas for the week, which I just turned into weed money. Like I still hadn't learned anything, right? I still hadn't learned anything. You know, a couple of months goes by, I got them all paid back, and they said, hey, we need to go and check on your grandfather. My grandfather was 91 at the time. He was living in a row house in Baltimore that he had bought in 1941. He'd been widowed about 20 years, and you couldn't pry him out of that row house with a crowbar if you tried. I mean, that was his home. You know, and that was home base when we were, you know, kids growing up. We went on vacation to go see grandfather every year. Like that was it, right? They said we need to go and check on him, and I said, sure, go, no problem, everything's fine. You know. By the time they got back a couple of weeks later, I had blown through every nickel of my next paycheck and $3,000 of the company's money out of the next 5 deposits. And I had quit my job because they won't catch me if I'm not there. That's what I did. I got arrested on Cinco de Mayo for whatever that's worth. I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I went to jail or do I look like I'm built for jail? Like, let's be real. I spent like 30 hours in Leeds, right? You know. I got very, very lucky. My general manager was looking out for me. I don't know why. They charged me with felony breach of trust. But he offered to allow me to do PTI and knock it down to a misdemeanor, that if I've completed PTI, pretrial intervention, that I could then get the charges expunged. Probably one of the greatest gifts that I've ever been given. I tried to make amends, but I never could find him. And so I did that, right? Like I went and did PTI, you know, I went and did the jail tour, and I did the IOP, right? The intensive, everybody knows what IOP is, right? The why drugs and alcohol are bad classes, right? I did those. I did IOP for 2 years. Now, they only required me to do 10 weeks, right? But I knew something was wrong. I still couldn't put it all together, but I knew something was wrong. And I learned all about IOP. I learned all about cognitive behavioral therapy. I learned all about HALT. I learned all about people, places, and things. I learned all about triggers. I love triggers. I have one trigger. It's consciousness. If I'm awake, and God loved those people who ran that IOP because they let me keep coming back. Hell, I was even a substitute teacher at sometimes, I signed a HIPAA form. I don't get to tell this story much, but I'm doing a CA. I can tell this story. So I signed a HIPAA form where I would take a drug test once a week. I would take the drug test, and then they would pick up the phone and call my mom. He passed. Every Saturday morning, I would get there at 8 in the morning. I would take the drug test. I would do 2 hours of IOP, and then I would go home. I did that for 2 years. I went back to school, got a part-time job. I went back to school full-time. I was on the dean's list 2 semesters in a row. Things were good. And then mom and dad said, hey, we need to go and check on your grandfather again. Sure, go, no problem. They were gone a couple of weeks. I made it 9 days. And then I walked back into the same bar. And I started to order Miller Lights from the same bartender. And 45 minutes later, one of the same dope men walked in the back door. And the next thing I knew, I was in the bathroom stuffing cocaine up my nose again. And I figured out how to beat the test. Not that I'm trying to tell you folks how to beat the test, but I figured out how to beat the test with what I was doing. I would pass a drug test Saturday morning. I would get high for the next 24 hours straight. We would do coke for 24 and drink for 24 hours straight. I would sweat for 6 days, and then I would pass the drug test again Saturday morning. I did that 3-4 weeks in a row. And by the time mom and dad came home, I blew through every nickel that I had saved. And I had some guy that they didn't know calling their house looking for me. And I didn't know what else to do. Now, if you're like me, you're a good addict and alcoholic like me, when you get in trouble, the first thing you have to do is mitigate the consequences. I got to get out in front of this, right? I'm in trouble. And so I called my brother. I'm such a martyr, right? That's 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. I called my brother and apologized to him for ruining the Thanksgiving that we were having at his house this week coming up. Because again, my sobriety is November 21st. That was a Sunday. Thanksgiving was the Thursday coming, and we were going to have Thanksgiving at his house. And I knew that it was going to be an awkward Thanksgiving, to say the least, because I was in trouble again. And he told me that I needed to call the counselor that I'd been doing IOP with. And then when mom and dad got home, I needed to tell them, and then I needed to go to a meeting. And I said, okay. Because here's one of the things that I know about people who were, I don't want to say new in recovery per se, but I know that when we're in trouble, if someone says they have a solution for our problem, we will do whatever they tell us to do. Because they got a solution. I'm in trouble, right? And Donovan's heard me say this before. I'm not really very concerned about somebody who's got 5, 10, 15, 20 days and they're coming to meetings and they're starting to kind of do the deal and hang out and check it out. I'm not real worried about them because they've got the doom right on top of them and they're going to do whatever I tell them to do because I got a solution for their problem right now at this moment, right? The folks that I'm worried about are the folks who have 40 or 45 days or 60 days. Life starts to get better, right? The judge is off the back, the lawyer is off the back, the parents are off the back, the family's off their back, baby mama or baby daddy's off their back, like they got a little bit of money in their pocket, like they might have their license or their car back, like things are better. And, being good addicts and alcoholics, what we do is we start negotiating recovery. But I still got to do all this, do all these meetings and eat class. Everything's fine. Like, let's not overreact, right? You know, I got a decade that says that there's a problem here, but let's not overreact, right? So I went to this meeting, and it was a different fellowship. And after they finished all their readings at the beginning of the meeting, they said, does anybody have anything that they would like to share? And I hurled all over those people for the next 20 minutes straight. I was a broken, bawling, blubbering mess. I didn't get it. The book says, how did I get here again? We pounded on the bar. How did I get here again? Right? I was there again. I didn't get it. I didn't understand what had happened. Now, what's really interesting, and I don't get to tell this story much either, is the woman, the counselor who ran the IOP, had developed a relationship with my parents because she was calling them every week to tell them that I was okay. And so when I went to go and see her again the next week, my mom went with me. And she pulled my mom in her office and shut the door. And what I know now, but of course I wasn't privy to at the time, was that counselor said to her, your son is an addict and alcoholic, and he needs to do more than what he's been doing up to now. Because if what he was doing up to now was working, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. I don't know what more looks like, but he needs to do more. And at the same time, I had started going to meetings. I went to that meeting on Sunday, and then I went to another meeting the next day on Monday, and we'll talk about that in a second. But one of the other things that I started doing was the deal that I made with my parents, my last opportunity, right? One more opportunity, we're going to give you one more chance, right? My last opportunity was that I was going to go to meetings, and I was going to go to IOP twice a week, and I was going to take 2 drug tests a week. I was going to take a drug test Saturday morning. I was going to take a drug test Wednesday night, because the chances that I could beat 2 drug tests a week are pretty slim. The half-life on cocaine is about 72 hours, right? I took 2 drug tests a week for the next 4 years straight. The whole time I was doing 12-step recovery, and I was full-time in school and part-time and then full-time at work, I took 2 drug tests a week for the next 4 years straight, because that's what my family needed. And I remember my sponsor was like, bro, I'd have a resentment against that. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. I don't care anymore. Like, I'm here because I beat, how else do you earn trust back to a bunch of people who don't understand who we are? My parents aren't us. They're not like me. They don't get it. I don't care. Just take the test, bro. Like, if you ain't got nothing to hide, does it matter? I took the test. 4 years, I took 2 drug tests a week. I took 2 drug tests a week until my dad died. And then after that, my mom was like, it's okay. And I said, okay. So I went to that meeting, and then when I got home that night, my brother had sent me an email. And in the email, there was a phone number, and it said, I want you to call this guy. He's in Charleston. I think he can help you. Okay, again, I'm going to do what anybody's telling me to do right now, right? And so then the next day I called this guy. It was like noon. It was like lunchtime. And he picked up the phone. And for maybe the first time in a decade, I got honest with someone. I was like, look, man, I got a problem with cocaine and alcohol, and I don't know what to do about it. And I heard maybe you can help me. And he started working his 12-step over the phone with me. He started talking step 1. He started talking allergy, obsession, spiritual malady over the phone with me. And he got me to another meeting that night. And I picked up my real white chip that night. Like, my sobriety date is November the 21st, 2010. I actually picked up my white chip on the 22nd, because I didn't pick up one at the other meeting because I still didn't know what I was doing yet, But I picked up a white chip that night. And the reason why was because when I got to that meeting, I had my first real epiphany in 12-step recovery. They were reading, it was a big book study. There's about 25 people in the room, and they were reading page 64. They were reading the resentments. They were reading the inventory, right? And after the finished reading, they read like 2 pages, right? And then they all started sharing. And this one guy, he says, well, look, I did my inventory, but this one thing keeps coming up, and I keep talking to my sponsor about it, but it won't go away, and I don't know what to do. And somebody else jumped in and said, well, if you did your inventory, but this problem won't go away and you keep talking about it, then you need to go back and write another inventory and take another look at it because you missed something. And in that moment, I got it. Oh, they do the 12 steps more than once. Oh, the program's cyclic, right? What we said in the beginning, recovery is a lifestyle. See, I never understood that. I didn't know anything about the 12 steps, but my preconceived notion was, I'm going to do 12 things and my life is going to get better. Are you insane? Like, do you know who I am? That's not going to work, right? That's genuinely what I thought. And so when I understood that they did recovery like they did the 12 steps over and over and over again, like I could wrap my head around that concept. And after the meeting, the guy that I had called who got me to that meeting, he gave me a big book. And he gave me a phone list. They passed around a phone list at the beginning of the meeting. I still got my white chip phone list. It's framed on the wall in my house. And on the front of it, it's got this note. It says, Doctor's Opinion 164. You have to read the book. And that's what this guy told me. He said, the instructions to getting and staying sober are in the book. You got to read the book. Okay, again, I'm in trouble. I'll read the book. Fine. And I did. I read the book. And I went to like 5 meetings a week for the next couple of weeks. And then he pulled me aside again and he was like, yo, man, you got a car. I was like, yeah, I still had a car this time. I don't know how I pulled that off. He said, you need to be giving dudes rides to meetings. And I'd met another guy at that meeting who ran a sober house. And so I asked him, look, can I call your sober house and see if your dudes want to go to a meeting? And if so, can I come and pick them up? And he was like, yeah, sure, fine. And 5 days a week for the next couple of months, I'd pick up the phone. Yo, guys, I'll be there in 20 minutes if y'all want to go. Like clockwork. You could have carved it in granite. I was going to pick those dudes up. I didn't know that we were laying the foundation for what we do in recovery. I didn't know that was service work. I didn't know that was altruistic, one guy helping another guy, one addict helping. I didn't know any of that. I was just doing what I was told. I would put 4 dudes in the car and we would go bombing down the interstate to some meeting. And we got 7 months sobriety between all of us, which is important because like I've been sober for a while and Donovan and these other people who here, they've been sober for a while. And it's probably hard to see that. Like it's kind of hard to see that, I couldn't see, I'm 14 years and change sober. I couldn't see that at 30 days. But somebody who had 60 days, I could see that. Like I could talk to them, you know what I'm saying? And so we talked. We talked about what our sponsor told us and what, blah, 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 what this guy said at the meeting. And it was super helpful for me. I don't know what happened to any of those guys. I know one of them's dead. I know one of them for sure is dead. I don't know what happened to any of the rest of those guys. And then I finally started doing the steps, right? And the step 1, the allergy and the obsession, that's easy. I'll walk into any room in the world. Again, I don't know any of you guys. I'll walk in here and I just spend 30 minutes telling you about my disease, right, bro? I got a problem with drugs and alcohol. Like that. Ray Charles can see that I got a problem with drugs and alcohol, right? Like this isn't hard, So that's step 1A, that powerless, that's not a problem. That's step 1B, that unmanageability, right? That spiritual malady. Like I needed some help with that, because I always had a job. I didn't pay my bills unless I had to. I paid the dope man, but I always had a job, right? My sponsor sat me down and he broke out the bedevilments, right? He broke out page 52. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We can't control our emotional natures. We're a prey to misery and depression. We have a feeling of uselessness. We're full of fear. We're unhappy. We can't seem to be of real help to other people, right? Lee, when you're out there drinking and using, are you having all of those problems? Yeah, I all of those problems. Lee, when you're not drinking and using, when you're trying to put it all back together again and white knuckle it and be good, are you still having all those problems? Yeah. Boy, isn't that interesting. See, the drugs and alcohol aren't the problem, right? I'm the problem. I'm not good at this thing called life. I have to be honest about that. Like I got a decade or more's worth of history that says that I ain't good at life. When I follow directions, when I do what my parents tell me to do, or my teachers tell me to do, or my coaches, or my customers, or my bosses, when I follow directions, things go well. When I do what I want, whenever I want it my way, it's a clown show. It is absolute just nuts. It is dumb. It's reality TV, right? It's crazy. And I have to be honest about that. Matter of fact, page 60, there's part C in page 60. It says that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, right? That's a very important piece of syntax, that line. Because the question is, if my life was unmanageable because I was powerless over drugs and alcohol, then that line would read that we were alcoholic, so we could not manage our own lives. That's not what it says. It says that we were alcoholic and we could not manage our own lives. See, my reaction to my inability to be good at this thing called life, left to my own devices, is to run away and go get loaded. That's my reaction. That's the coping mechanism. That's all I know. All I know without God in my life in this program is to get loaded and run. That's all I know. And I've got decades of experience that tells you that's true. And so, I'm spiritually sick, right? I'm allergic, obsessive, spiritually sick, and I need somebody else to tell me what to do. That's the truth, And then step 2 tells me, came to believe that a higher power of understanding can restore us to sanity. My favorite word is the word sanity. I work that step backwards. If I think living in step 1 makes sense, this is crazy, right? I mean, I gave you guys the greatest hits, right? But you all have 1,000 insane stories, right? I got 1,000 insane stories. Go tell one of your insane stories to a normal person, right? They'll look at you like, "Bro, what are you talking about?" You'd be like, "Dude, that was Tuesday." Right? Wait till I get money. Right. Wait, the weekend's coming, just hold tight. This is nuts. But the thing is until I embrace and accept that living in step 1 is crazy, I'm never asking anybody for any help, much less a God that I can't see. And my sponsor put me in a box on that too. He said, "Look, bro, you can take God, chuck him out the window. If you can't do what I'm telling you to do when I'm sitting right here in front of you and you can see me, you can hear me, how can you ever talk to a God that you can't see?" And seeing the thing is embracing step 1 recognizes that I'm out of options. And then step 2 says it's kind of nice to have an option when you done run out of options. And that leads me into step 3. I'm going to make a decision to turn our will and lives over the care of God as we understand. I'm going to consciously choose to go and seek God as I understand God, right? I've never done this before. I mean, I spent my life pouring jobs and money and status and stuff and women and drugs now, all of that stuff, right? The God-sized hole, right? And wake up every morning and I hate what I see in the mirror if I even look in the mirror. I don't want to do that anymore. And this is where the beauty of the program starts to come out. We're talking about God. We're not talking about religion. And I'm not knocking religion. The book says most of us join religious communities, right? But not all of us, but most of us, right? The book talks about God. You call him whatever you want. God, Allah, Buddha, Minerva, Zeus, Jupiter, Shiva, Ra, Yahweh, Jehovah, Father Time, Mother Earth, Spirit of the Universe. Pick one. For thousands of years, billions of people have been seeking a higher power, and they seemingly have had really good lives. My life is hell right now. Let me get some of this God. Anything's got to be better than what I got going on right now. Let's go. That led me into the inventory, right? That led me into steps 4 and 5. I'm going to get honest about how I got right here. How did I get here? And I'm going to put down all the people that I'm mad at. That's the easy part. I'm going to put down what I did wrong. I did something wrong. I'm confused, right? I'm going to put down all of my fears, right? Because I ain't afraid of anything, right? I'm afraid of everything. One of the reasons why I stayed out of the rooms and didn't go do 12 steps for all those years is because I was walking through a room full of people and they were going to know. Think about that. They were going to know. I couldn't handle that, right? I'm gonna get honest about what I'm afraid of. I'm going to go do a sex inventory, right? Which that we're all terrified of that too. Don't be going through those pages, bro, but it's got to be done, right? And then I'm going to go and get honest with someone else about that stuff. And I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I got saved at the end of my 5th step, but I will tell you that I walked out there a lot lighter. I walked out there a lot. Man, that was nice. To finally just talk all that stuff out, And that led me right into 6 and 7, and that's where the miracle starts to happen. Because in 6 and 7, I'm now going to go have a conversation with God. I'm going to go talk to God about what it is that's been keeping me from him and from a better life. You know, I'm going to talk to him about all the things that I'm afraid. God, without you today, I'm going to think that I'm not good enough. Without you today, I'm going to be afraid that nobody's going to like me or love me. And then I'm going to be alone, and I'm not going to be able to take care of myself, and I'm not going to have enough money. Without you today, this is how I'm going to feel. And I don't want to feel that way anymore. And so I'm going to give that to you, and you tell me what to do, and I'll go do that, and hopefully I'll have a better day. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. I walked in the door on step 1 broken and hopeless with nothing. And 6 steps later, I'm talking to God. And I'm giving him the stuff that I can't handle, and I'm asking him to give me what he needs me to do. Man, that's nice. That is a miracle. If you haven't tried that, and if you're not doing that on a regular daily basis, give it a whirl, because man, that's nice. There's something about it. It works. And that led me into 8 and 9, right? I'm going to go make these amends, the dreaded amends, right? The end of the 7-step prayer says, give me strength to go out from here, right? Because I'm getting ready to go have a whole bunch of conversations that I don't want to have. And if you've been in recovery before, or you spent any time around 12 steps, we lose people at 3 places. We lose them at step 1 because they're not ready. We lose them at step 4 because they're not willing. And we lose them at step 9 out of pure, unadulterated fear. It is terrifying to go back to these people that I know I did wrong and say to them, what I did to you was wrong. It's hard. It was very difficult for me to put on paper and tell my parents that, I'm sorry you had to pick me up from jail and that I stole from you. And that, I was so cavalier with a life that you worked so hard to give me. Like that's a hard conversation to have. But it is also probably the most freeing thing that we can do. Because it's all said and done, it's all taken care of. And if you haven't done it yet, I implore you, please do it. We lose so many people at step 9 out of that because they're just not willing to, and it's the best thing. And I implore you, if you haven't done it yet, please do it. And then that leads me into 10, 11, and 12. 1 through 9, get me sober. 10, 11, and 12, keep me sober. And that's what just for today means. For anybody who's ever been in a meeting and somebody threw just for today from the back of the room like it was a big mic drop moment, but there was no context to it. Right, yeah, just for today is 10, 11, and 12. 10 says, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, because they're all coming at once, we pray, we talk to someone, we make amends, we turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Think about what your sponsor or what the counselors here told you when you first got here. Hey, before you push the big red button and leave, and, quit your job and change your phone number and, move out of town and throat punch the counselor on the way out the door, why don't you give me a call? Why don't you talk to us? Imagine that, right? See, step 10 is designed to keep me sober in that moment because there's going to be a moment. There's going to be a moment. There's going to be a time when I'm ready to blow out. And step 10 is designed to keep me sober in that moment. And step 11 says, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact, asking only for his knowledge. Right? Hey, God, where else are you today? Think about this for a minute. Where else is God today? Where else am I looking for God today? If I'm not looking for God somewhere else, why not? Like he's done all this amazing, miraculous work to get me here. He's putting all of these things back together in my life, but I'm not going to go and talk to him about the money or the relationship, right? Like, why wouldn't I do that? And those are the things I need to do. And there's a level of emotional sobriety here, right? Like I need to be able to talk to him about anything. I need to be able to work any of this stuff out. And if I'm not doing that, I'm in trouble. And that leads me to step 12. We try to carry the message. I can't make you get the message, but we try to carry the message. Every time a new roommate walks in that door, y'all got a chance to carry the message. And if you've been here 40, 50, 60, 80, whatever days, you've seen some people walk right back out that door. You can't make them get the message. but you can try. Comma, and practice these principles in all our affairs. That's the hard part. I have to practice these principles when it comes to family and relationships and money, right? You know, there's no chapter in the book for some of this stuff, right? There's no chapter in the book for your dad's going to get cancer. You know, there's no chapter in the book for you can't have that job. You can't have that raise. You can't have that promotion. Matter of fact, we're going to give you a demotion. You know, there's no chapter in the book for I don't love you. I love you, but I don't love you enough to stay. You know, what am I going to do then? Right? And if I'm not talking to God, like at some point it's me and the four walls and that's it. And then what? Right? And if I'm not doing this work, I'm going to be in trouble. That's what Just for Today is. This is what keeps me sober. You know, and I can tell you all about the material stuff in the house and the business that I helped start. And I can tell you all of that. I can look in the mirror today. I spent a long time not looking in the mirror. I used it. I didn't look at it. I can look in the mirror today. I'm okay with who I see today. I'm okay with who I am today. You know, I have the ability to work through anything that life brings my way. I have the ability to work through anything that God says, I need you to work through this. You know, I have that now. I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay. I wasn't okay for a long time. I feel better. And that's all we want, right? We all walk in the door because we want to feel better. I feel better. So I'll give you two stories and then we can stop. So when so there was this guy growing up in my neighborhood, and he was like the neighborhood badass, right? He was like the most likely to do 25 to life guy, right? And when I was 9 or 10 years old, he got into a fight with my brother and he beat my brother up. And so fast forward 25 years or so, and I think this guy reached out to my brother on Facebook, but they started to have a conversation. And at some point, a phone number got exchanged and there was a phone call. And the guy wanted to talk to my brother because he wanted to apologize to him for beating him up when they were kids. And my brother was like, dude, man, that's 25 years ago. We were kids. Like, and the guy was like, nah, man, dude, that was wrong. Like, what I did to you was wrong. And I'm trying to do something different with my life. And my brother's ears kind of perked up a little. And so they kept talking, and it turned out this guy was in recovery. He was doing his 9 step. He was making his amends. And at the end of the call, my brother said, hey, man, if there's ever anybody in Charleston who could use your help, can I give them your phone number? And the guy said, absolutely. And 6 months later, that was the phone number that my brother emailed me. And that was the guy who got me to a meeting and gave me a big book, and he sponsored me. And he still sponsors me to this day. That was 14 and a half years ago. And he comes up here every once in a while. He's got 17 years. And you can't make that stuff. Hallmark doesn't write stories like that, bro. Like, do you not see God there? Like, what if, right? Like, what if he was like, I don't need to make that amends. That's 25 years. What if my brother was like, I don't want to talk to him? What if he didn't beat my brother up? Like, do you not see God? Like, that is wild. You know, I see evidence of God everywhere, but I could stop there and that would be enough. So, I guess it was 5 or 6 years ago, a friend of mine rolled up on this dude who was in his truck. He was passed out in his truck in the parking lot at a Target in Ladson, right? Window was open. You could smell the booze coming out the window. She wrote my phone number and his phone and her phone number on a piece of paper with a note that said, if you ever need any help with the drinking, give us a call. And she literally put it on his dashboard. And 2 days later, he called us. Why? You can't make that up right there. Like, that's wild in of itself. Turned out he lived in Somerville. I've got people in Somerville at the Step Up Club. I got sponsees out there. I've chaired meetings out there. I got people out there. So I sent him to the Step Up Club. And I told him to talk to this person and this person, you know. And he did. He went out there. And every couple of months I would hear about him, you know. And then the world ended, right? COVID hit and the world ended. And then about a year after that, they were having a party out there, and I hadn't been out there since before COVID. And so I went out there to the party because I just wanted to go and see some old friends, right? And when I got there, I was chatting, saying what's up, whatever. And then in the back, I saw this girl that I hadn't seen in a couple of years. I was like, I'm gonna go say hi. And I went out there, and as I got closer, I realized that she was pregnant. I was like, okay, that's new. And then I realized that she was with him because he was close to her, and it was plainly obvious that he was with him. And so I was like, okay. And so I went up and I said, what's up, guys? And the first thing he said to me when I walked up was, your phone number was in my window. And see, you can have the dope back. You can have the dope back, right? I got to be an ancillary character in What Changed 3 Lives. You know, that simple phone call, that simple little bit of help pointed him in a direction that turned into a family. They're married, they got 2 kids, their life is great. And I see him every once in a while, and usually that's one of the first things he says to me is, dude, man, your phone number was in my window. Like, bro, you can have the dope back. I'll take, to be a part of that, I'll take all you got and more. And I don't care who you are, and I don't care where you are, and I don't care how you got there, and I don't care what's going on. Find me on Facebook and send me a message. Get my phone number from Donovan or Nicole and call me. I'll help you find yours. I can't give you mine, but I'll help you find yours. And God knows I truly hope you do. So, my name's Lee Man, alcoholic. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.